Ever get this weird feeling like some ideas, they're not really ideas, more like a contagion, you know?
Mhm.
They get in your head and just mess with how you think.
Yeah, it's a powerful image. And that's what's so unsettling about Gad Saad's book, The Parasitic Mind. Like, he really leans into that, doesn't just use it as a metaphor. He's saying these ideas, they actually function like parasites, hijack our brains.
Okay, so let's break this down. Today, we're really diving deep into this idea of idea pathogens, right?
Mhm.
And how Saad argues they're eating away at, like, reason and freedom, especially in academia. And just a heads up, he's not exactly uh, subtle about it. It's provocative, often pretty funny, though.
Definitely keeps you on your toes.
Yeah.
But yeah, his writing style definitely matches his personality. To really get Saad, though, you have to understand, well, his story. It's really woven into the whole book.
Absolutely, not just some ivory tower theorizing here.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know, Gad Saad, he's a marketing professor, big name in evolutionary psychology.
Hmm.
But his background, anything but typical.
Understatement. Try growing up in Lebanon during the Civil War, seeing that kind of, I don't know, just the chaos, the violence, especially as a Jewish family. It had to shape how he sees the world.
And he puts it all out there.
Yeah.
That story about the man, Ahmad, who threatened his family during the war just because they were Jewish, chilling stuff. And it shows this isn't theoretical for him. These ideas have real weight.
Totally. That kind of experience, it makes sense why he's so wary of identity politics. It's something he criticizes a lot in the book.
Yeah, I could see that. When you see how group identity can be, like, twisted,
Yeah.
used to justify fear and violence, it makes you question any ideology that puts the group above the individual.
Exactly. And that goes back to what Saad holds up as so essential, like truly fundamental, freedom and truth. For him, they're inseparable, the bedrock of any decent society. And it's the engine that drives all his work.
So we've got this guy, right, side, shaped by war, really devoted to truth and freedom.
Hmm.
But what's the link to the parasitic mind, to these, like you said, idea pathogens?
Yeah, let's get into that. Saad's argument is that some ideas, they can really take hold in our thinking, almost like a parasite taking over a host. That's the idea pathogen thing, spreading, multiplying, and the fallout. It could be huge for us, for society, everything.
So not just a catchy title then, he's saying there's a direct parallel between bad ideas and like actual biological stuff.
He is, and he makes it convincing, too. He uses the example of Toxoplasma gondii, this
Yeah.
parasite, right? It messes with rats' brains, makes them lose their fear of cats, which, bad news for the rat.
Yeah, it's kind of horrifying.
Yes.
So the analogy being ideas can do that to us, get that level of control.
Totally. The parasite changes how the rat acts. Saad says certain ideas, they slip past our mental defenses, and boom, we're holding irrational beliefs, doing things that don't make sense.
Okay, so if these idea pathogens, they're like thought viruses, which ones is Saad most worried about?
Well, he sees them as thriving in a place you might not expect, honestly. Academia. He points to postmodernism as a big one, that whole no objective truth, everything's relative, just social constructs.
Oh, I've been in those conversations. So, like, what's even the point then? If there's no truth, why are we even talking?
Right, it eats itself. And Saad has this great example from an academic paper, no joke. This researcher analyzed get this, his own erections and orgasms, called it consumer research.
You can't make this stuff up.
Exactly. Shows you how absurd it gets.
So postmodernism, check. What other idea pathogens are on his list?
Radical feminism gets hit hard, specifically the parts that say biology has zero influence on why men and women are different. And he's not a fan of social constructivism either, the idea that we're blank slates, environments, everything, genes don't matter.
Like, come on, we're a mix, right? Nature and nurture both. Ignoring biology seems a bit much.
Exactly. Saad's not saying your upbringing is meaningless, more like, let's be realistic, it's not the whole picture.
Which brings up this question. What happens when really wanting to learn to get to the truth of things bumps up against, well, not wanting to offend anyone? Because the truth can sting sometimes.
And that tension is at the core of what Saad sees happening in universities now. They should be these places where ideas get challenged, debated, but he says they're more focused on protecting people from anything that might feel bad, even if it means truth gets sidelined.
And he has some compelling examples to back that up, like how university mottos have changed. It used to be about truth, knowledge, now it's all inclusivity, safe spaces.
Right. And he brings up Lawrence Summers, remember him, forced to resign as Harvard's president because he suggested, and this is all it was, that maybe innate differences between men and women, they might play some small role in why they choose certain careers.
It's like this fear of even asking the question has taken over. even if finding out the answer could be really valuable.
Exactly. Forbidden knowledge, as Saad calls it. It creates this environment where people, academics especially, are terrified to speak their mind, to do research that might rock the boat, challenge the accepted narrative. God forbid they get called insensitive or worse, bigoted.
And those emails he includes, right, from other academics, scared to speak out, worried about their careers, paints a grim picture.
It does, and it gets to the heart of why this all matters. Stifling free inquiry, it's not just some academic problem. It hurts everyone, weakens the whole foundation of an open society.
One of the things that really struck me reading The Parasitic Mind was how Saad sees this whole, I don't know, this clash of ideas playing out in science. It's like he holds science up as this almost sacred thing, and these idea pathogens are a direct threat.
Yeah, he's definitely a staunch defender of the scientific method, sees it as the best way we have to actually understand the world around us. It's objective, right? Always self-correcting. And this is where his whole critique of the Daihi movement comes in, that diversity, inclusion, equity push.
Which, on the surface, who's going to argue against diversity and inclusion?
Yeah.
Sounds great. But Saad's saying, not so fast. Let's look at how this is actually playing out, especially in universities.
Exactly. He's not saying diversity is bad, not at all. But what he's really getting at is this approach where it's more about appearances, about ideology, than actual intellectual diversity. Like how much time and money universities are pouring into DIE administration, often at the expense of actual research, actual teaching.
So instead of encouraging real debate, actually digging for the truth, it's more about making sure everyone feels good, feels represented, even if the ideas themselves, well, maybe they're not so great.
That's it. And this goes back to the whole forbidden knowledge thing. He's worried that certain topics, whole areas of research, are just becoming off limits, not because they're not scientifically sound, but because someone might get offended, because it challenges the current dogma.
It's like that whole push to decolonize science, this idea that science itself is somehow a white colonial thing that needs to be dismantled.
Yeah, that one really throws him. He just doesn't buy it. The scientific method, he argues, it's a universal framework. It's not owned by any one culture or ethnicity. It's a way to find out what's true, regardless of who's doing the experimenting.
He uses that great example of prime numbers, right? Like, do they change depending on the race of the mathematician? Of course not. But there's this push to treat even hard sciences like they're subjective, culturally relative.
Totally. And he's not saying we should ignore history, how science has been used and abused, but to throw out the scientific method altogether. He's saying that's not only illogical, it's dangerous. It actually undermines our ability to solve the big problems we're facing.
So where does that leave us? The Parasitic Mind, it's a tough read at times, no question. But it's also, I think, a call to action. Be aware of these thought traps, these idea pathogens, Saad says. Be a critical thinker. Be willing to stand up for reason, for evidence, even when it's uncomfortable.
He reminds us that searching for the truth takes guts. It takes being willing to ask hard questions and being open to having your mind changed. And those are values worth fighting for, not just in the classroom, but in life, period.
Because at the end of the day, this spread of these idea pathogens, it's not some abstract problem, it's a human problem. It affects all of us. So as you go deeper into the parasitic mind, and I hope you do, ask yourself, what role am I playing in all of this? Am I spreading these pathogens, or am I building immunity to them in myself and in the people around me? That's something to think about.